Iran had qualified for the biggest football tournament on earth. They had earned it, played every qualifier, beaten the teams in front of them, done everything the sport required of them. Their place at the 2026 World Cup was legitimate, confirmed, and deserved. And then, before they played a single match, they became the most complicated team in the history of the competition. Not because of anything that happened on a football pitch, because of something that happened on February 28, 2026. Something that had nothing to do with football at all. And that would force a qualified World Cup nation to do something no team had ever done before. Cross an international border to reach their own match. Every single time. This is the story of how one of football's biggest tournaments collided with one of the world's most volatile geopolitical moments. And why the questions it raised about FIFA, about the World Cup, and about what it actually means to host the sport the whole world claims to love, are questions that nobody inside football's governing structures has fully answered. Start with what qualifying for a World Cup is supposed to feel like. For Iran, the qualification campaign for 2026 had been the culmination of years of investment in a footballing infrastructure that had quietly become one of the most competitive in Asia. Their squad contained players performing at the top levels of European club football. Mehdi Taremi had established himself as a genuine elite striker. Alireza Beranvand had produced performances in goal that drew attention from clubs across the continent. The team's collective identity, the defensive organization, the tactical coherence, the sense of shared purpose had been built carefully across multiple campaigns. When qualification was confirmed, it was a genuine moment of national pride. Iran's 7th World Cup appearance, their 4th in a row, a statement about where Iranian football stood in the global picture. The celebration did not last long. On February 28, 2026, military conflict began between the United States and Iran. The specific details of the conflict and its political dimensions are beyond the scope of this video. What matters for this story is the consequence for a football team that had already qualified to play in the United States in June. Iran's sports minister went on state television. His message was unambiguous. Under no circumstances, he said, can we participate in the World Cup. Not a maybe, not a negotiating position, a statement of intent from a government official, broadcast nationally, about a football tournament that was 3 months away. FIFA's response arrived quickly. Gianni Infantino addressed the question at the FIFA Congress in Vancouver in late April, opening his remarks by confirming, directly and without qualification, that Iran would participate. He said it the way someone says something they have had to say many times already and are tired of having to say again. What followed was a negotiation without precedent in the history of tournament football. The Iranian Football Federation produced a formal list of demands. Visa guarantees for every player and staff member. Guarantees about the correct playing of their national anthem. Guarantees about the respectful treatment of their flag. Guarantees about the safety of their delegation at airports, hotels, and in transit between venues. FIFA agreed to what it could. The United States government agreed to what it was willing to. And the gap between those two things is where Iran's 2026 World Cup actually lived. Iran's original base camp had been set up in Tucson, Arizona. Months of preparation had gone into the arrangement. A facility had been assessed and approved. Training schedules had been built around it. And then the United States government announced that the Iranian squad would not be permitted to stay overnight on American soil for the duration of the tournament. Not in Tucson, not anywhere. FIFA worked with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's government to find an alternative. The solution that emerged was Tijuana, the border city in northern Baja California, directly across the crossing from San Diego. Iran would establish their base there, train there, sleep there, and for every match day, they would wake up in Mexico and travel to the United States, then play a World Cup match, then return to Mexico, every time. Think about what that looks like in practice, not as a logistical abstract, as the daily reality of a professional sports team preparing for the most important competition of their careers. Every other team at the 2026 World Cup followed a version of the same routine. Arrive in the host city, settle into the base camp, train, prepare, walk to the stadium when the time came, sleep in the same country where the match was played, recover, repeat. Iran's routine was different. Different in ways that added logistical complexity, physical disruption, and psychological weight to every single match day. The border crossing itself, the security checks, the travel time, The uncertainty that accompanies any international movement in a period of active geopolitical tension was something that no other squad at the tournament experienced, not once, not occasionally, before and after every match. The competitive impact became visible on the pitch in a way that Iran's coach felt compelled to address publicly. Amir Galanoy told reporters after the New Zealand draw that players had developed cramps during the match in conditions that did not explain cramping. He connected it explicitly to the disrupted preparation window. He was not offering an excuse. He was describing a physical reality that the data of the match appeared to support. Iran had also requested to arrive in host cities 48 hours before their matches, the standard preparation window that coaches at this level build their tactical work around. The request was submitted before the New Zealand match. It was denied. The restriction imposed by United States authorities allowed Iran to enter the country no earlier than 24 hours before kickoff. They were required to leave the same day the match ended. The request was submitted again before the Belgium match. It was denied again. And alongside the travel restrictions came a detail that moved the story from logistical challenge into something more pointed. Portions of Iran's coaching staff and administrative personnel had not received visas to enter the United States. The specific individuals affected and the specific reasons given for the denials were not fully disclosed publicly. What was confirmed by Iran's own coaching staff in press conferences was that members of the technical team who would normally be present in the dugout during matches were absent. Not sidelined by illness or choice. Absent because they could not enter the country. A World Cup team managing substitutions during a World Cup match without their full coaching infrastructure. The Iranian Football Federation submitted a formal complaint to FIFA's Competition Commission in June, detailing the restrictions and arguing that the accumulated effect constituted a competitive disadvantage with no equivalent anywhere else in the tournament. The complaint named the 24-hour entry window. It documented the denied requests for extended preparation time. It raised the question of whether the conditions Iran was operating under were consistent with FIFA's own obligations to participating teams. FIFA acknowledged the complaint. A substantive public response had not been issued as of the time this video was produced. But the questions the complaint raised did not stay inside FIFA's Competition Commission. They moved into the press conferences, the broadcast studios, the football media platforms, and the fan communities that follow the sport at this level. The central question was direct. FIFA chose the host. FIFA knew when it made that choice that the United States had a complex and at times hostile relationship with Iran that carried specific risks for Iranian participation. FIFA knew the host country's immigration frameworks could affect teams from specific nations. FIFA confirmed Iran's group stage matches in Los Angeles and Seattle. And when the conditions of Iranian participation were challenged, FIFA's response was consistent and institutional. FIFA does not control host country immigration processes. Which is true. FIFA does not control immigration law. It cannot override the decisions of sovereign governments about who enters their territory. But FIFA does control something else. It controls which countries host the World Cup. That decision is made by FIFA's member associations through a process FIFA designs and administers. And the decision to award the 2026 World Cup to the United States was made with full awareness of the political landscape in which the United States exists, and the relationships that landscape creates with other nations. The argument that FIFA bears no responsibility for the consequences of host country immigration decisions is technically accurate in a narrow sense. In a broader sense, it is the argument of an organization that made the decision that created the conditions and then declined to own the consequences of that decision. That argument was made by journalists, by football commentators, by academics who study sports governance, by fan groups who followed the story from its beginning. And it was made most pointedly by Galenoy himself, who described his team as perhaps the most oppressed in the World Cup, and who said that decisions seemed to be being made elsewhere, by people his team had no access to. He said it because it was the most honest description he could offer of the experience his team was living. Set against that experience is the experience of every other team at the tournament, settled in their host cities, training on familiar pitches, sleeping in the country where their matches are played, recovering properly between fixtures, building the kind of physical and tactical preparation that World Cup performances are built on. The contrast is not invisible to the players living it. It cannot be. And the question of whether that contrast affected Iran's results, in a tournament where fine margins decide everything, is not answerable with certainty. But it is a question that the facts of the situation make entirely legitimate to ask. Taremi addressed it with the directness that has characterized his public presence throughout this campaign. After the New Zealand match, when Infantino visited the Iranian dressing room and told the players they were writing history and that he would try to help, Taremi said he believed the FIFA president's intentions were genuine. And then he said something that carried the full weight of everything surrounding the team's situation. It is about other things too. Everyone knows it. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Everyone in that room understood what the other things were. They are the things that exist in the space between football and the world that surrounds it. The things that FIFA's statements about not being involved in host country immigration processes acknowledge by implication without naming directly. Here is the question that the Iran situation at the 2026 World Cup forces into the open. Is it possible for football to be genuinely global, while the mechanisms of hosting remain subject to the political frameworks of individual nations? The World Cup has always claimed to transcend borders. Its promotional language, across decades and across every host nation, has been built around the idea that football connects what politics divides. That the 90 minutes on the pitch is a space where the conflicts outside it temporarily cease to matter. That the World Cup belongs to the world. But a team crossing a border every match day and sleeping in a different country from the one hosting the tournament is a visible, daily, documented expression of the limits of that claim. The football may have transcended the border on the pitch. The players could not transcend it when they needed to prepare, to sleep, to recover, to be ready. There are reasonable arguments on multiple sides of this. There are those who argue that FIFA should have anticipated this situation and built contractual obligations into the host agreement that protected all participating nations' rights to full preparation access, regardless of the diplomatic relationship between the host country and any qualified team. There are those who argue that FIFA cannot be expected to predict or control the actions of sovereign governments, that the military conflict that changed Iran's situation began months after the host country was selected, and that the organization did what it could within the constraints it faced. There are those who argue that the situation reveals a fundamental structural problem in how the World Cup selects its hosts, that criteria beyond stadium capacity and commercial appeal need to include a rigorous assessment of what hosting requires from the perspective of every nation that might qualify. All of those arguments are present in the coverage of this situation. None of them has been definitively resolved. What has been resolved is the football. Iran played 3 group stage matches from a hotel in Tijuana. They crossed the border 3 times. They earned 2 draws against New Zealand and Belgium, with performances that produced some of the individual highlights of the tournament's opening 2 weeks. Bayern Van became the match's outstanding player against Belgium by popular vote. Taremi led with the specific, quiet authority of a captain who had decided that the circumstances around the football would not determine the football itself. They needed to beat Egypt to qualify. They did not. Their World Cup is over. The journey back to Tijuana after the final whistle must have felt different from the journeys that preceded it. Not the border crossing of a team returning to prepare for the next match. The border crossing of a team going home. A team that had, across 3 weeks and 6 crossings, produced football that deserved a different story. Inside a situation that no team at any World Cup has ever faced in quite this way. Galenoe gathered his players in the dressing room after the Egypt defeat. Whatever he said in those minutes, it was said to a group of people who had done something genuinely extraordinary. Not on the scoreboard. In the simple act of being there and competing and refusing to let the circumstances make them less than what they were. The question that Iran's 2026 World Cup leaves behind is the one that sport keeps asking and keeps failing to answer. Can a competition that belongs to the whole world be hosted by a single country, without the politics of that country shaping who gets to belong? The answer from a hotel in Tijuana, from a border crossing at dawn, from a dressing room in Seattle where a team processed the end of a campaign unlike any other, is that football has not found it yet. What do you think? Should FIFA build stronger protections into host agreements to guarantee equal preparation conditions for every qualified nation? And can a tournament that claims to be for everyone be truly for everyone while its hosting model remains as it is? Leave it in the comments. These are the conversations this channel exists for.